Hi, my name is Phil. This week has been the absolute worst in my life. And to top it off, I am now faced with a decision that will affect my life and that of my loved ones forever. I simply don't know what to do. I work in an illegal business. To avoid incriminating myself, let's say I help move merchandise from one party to another. I give my customers the ability to purchase substances that aren't exactly legal and cannot be found anywhere else. I think you can connect the dots as to what I do. With that being said, from day one, I knew the dangers that came tied to my line of work. I knew what I signed up for, and I don't regret it. I have seen friends killed, co-workers disappear overnight, never to be seen again. And I myself had close calls with competing gangs. But as long as I stayed a step ahead of others, I have always been okay. Until this week. This horrifying week's events began Monday, in my usual place of business, Dairy Queen. I know it might sound like an odd location to conduct my illegal business, but really, it's perfect. First, it's extremely public, so our competition will never target us in such a highly visible venue. Second, our customers feel safe in Dairy Queen. A lot of my clientele are first-time buyers and users, and we try to make the whole experience as seamless as possible. They usually contact me through phone, and we meet up inside for the transaction. Third, Dairy Queen has some delicious ice cream. So, I am able to conduct my business and indulge in some delicious treats. It's the little things. On Monday, I sat in my usual booth just as a customer had left. I sat counting my wads of bills when a feeling of being watched came over me. I stared forward as a shadow began to form in front of me. Someone stood directly behind me. Dread filled me. Had they been watching my previous customer and me? How would I explain having $700 in my hand? The shadow grew, and a cold hand touched the back of my shoulder. I suppressed the urge to jump and tried to act natural. "Hello," came a high-pitched voice. I turned slowly, expecting the worst, only to find myself with a toddler not much older than 7. He waved at me and handed me a small slip of paper. "I'm so sorry," exclaimed the woman. She hurried over. I looked away for a minute and Jimmy got away from me. I'm so sorry." She scooped up the kid like a football and walked away. From over his mother's shoulder, the little boy's head bobbed with each step she took, staring at me. He smiled cunningly and waved. I began to relax again and glanced at the small slip of paper. It read, "I saw you." The handwriting was shaky and uneven. I glanced forward again, but the boy was gone. Was this a joke? Was he sent by someone to deliver a message? The handwriting looked like that of a child, so maybe I was being overly paranoid. You can never be too careful in this line of work. So I packed my things, grabbed my ice cream cone, and left the Dairy Queen. I drove through a secluded dirt road, trying to avoid the eyes of policemen and other law enforcement. At a distance, an old 1970s muscle car appeared to be stranded on the side of the road. But as I drove past it, I glanced at my rearview mirror and saw a cloud of dirt that had materialized from the muscle car's acceleration as it joined the dirt road, gaining speed towards me. Shit, I thought. I accelerated, but so did the old car behind me. He drew closer and closer, now inches away from my rear bumper. I was sure I wasn't being paranoid now. This man was out to get me. I observed him from my mirror, now close enough for me to notice distinct tattoos on the driver's bearded face. He reached to his glove compartment, lowered his window, and I stared as his arm extended out the window. He was gripping a pistol in his hand, aimed directly at my car. I floored the gas pedal, but even over the car's engine's straining noises, the first bullet rang loudly into the old dirt road. The bullet whizzed over my roof. There was momentary silence, broken by the sound of the second bullet. My left mirror shattered in an explosion, sending glass and pieces of metal in all directions. His shots were getting closer. At a distance, a stoplight shone green, marking the first signs of reaching the downtown area. Surely if I made it downtown, he wouldn't continue shooting among so many pedestrians and law enforcement, right? Sure enough, as I passed the first stoplight, the car swerved, turned back, and disappeared into the sunset. I was safe, but for how long? The rest of the week, as a measure of precaution, I moved around and conducted business in various Dairy Queens around town. Each day took me to a new location, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was continuously being watched. Yesterday, I entered the DQ, ordered my large ice cream cone, and sat in a booth next to a window in front of the parking lot. I began glancing at my phone, waiting for my customer to arrive. Footsteps approached. I stared forward as a man approached my booth. He stood right in front of the booth, but didn't say a word. Can I help you? I asked impatiently. He stared, the edge of his mouth curling. I noticed the tattoos on this man's neck. Look, man, I don't want any trouble, I said, beginning to feel afraid. The man looked out the window. In the parking lot, an old muscle car in excellent condition stood. The driver and the man next to me locked eyes. They nodded a quick bob. The man patted my shoulder and walked away. Shit, I thought. They found me. Should I leave now? Will they follow me? I began collecting my things, but in the commotion, I didn't hear anybody approach me. He slithered quickly into my booth. Listen, Phil, said the man in a cool and calm voice. I hope you're not planning on leaving just yet. We're here to help you. A similar smirk overcame his face. How do you know my name? I asked, hiding the fear in my voice. I wouldn't worry about that as much as... He began but was interrupted by a loud voice. I turned wildly, blood pumping with adrenaline. Sorry, said the teenager in a Dairy Queen uniform. I asked if you needed anything else. She smiled kindly. I shook my head, indicated I didn't want to talk to her. The man in the booth laughed. You're on edge now, aren't you? What would an innocent man as yourself have to fear? He asked, his voice heavy with sarcasm. Fuck you, I responded, standing up to leave. I told you, I wouldn't leave if I were you, he said, but he was behind me now as I made my way outside the door. I exited, absorbing the hot sunshine. Okay, I have to be extra careful now, I told myself. I cannot be followed. What should I? In that instant, a body tackled me to the ground, landing heavy on my side. I heard a crack emitted from my shoulder as it came down hard onto the concrete. Stay the fuck down, the voice whispered sharply. If you know what's good for you, stay the fuck down. Before I had a chance to respond, the Dairy Queen's parking lot became a war zone. Automatic rifles peeked from the windows of various cars in the parking lot, showering the area with stray bullets. Various customers, who I had assumed were regular police, pulled out pistols and began firing back. FBI, drop your weapons! I covered my head and recoiled with every loud blast. I glanced up and noticed various men, tattooed and not, laying lifelessly on the ground. On one, a small river of blood trickled from his mouth and nose. The sun glistened off the blood from another lifeless body. A small bullet-sized crater in the center of his head oozed blood and pus. They all laid among bullet shells, blood, and debris. After what appeared to be hours, the firefight ended. Silence filled the Dairy Queen parking lot, broken only by the gasping of a tattooed man that grasped at a bullet hole in his neck. Our eyes met momentarily. He stared, pleading, gasping like a fish out of water. After a few seconds, life left his eyes. He laid there, just like the rest of the corpses. Phil Mendoza, came a deep, hefty voice. Are you all right? I am Special Agent Michael White of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. You are under arrest. In the police station, a group of officers comprised of FBI agents, local policemen, and sheriff deputies explained the situation. My hometown had grown to be a hotspot for illicit activities, involving my group and 3 other gangs that competed for the territory. The FBI had caught wind of the situation and had been observing me, tailing me, and bugging my phones. For the last months, the FBI had been fully aware of my activities, following me to lead them to the competition. I was their bait, and it worked. I am now at a crossroads. The FBI has offered me a deal. I can inform them with everything I know of my group's operations, and that of any competitor in exchange for my freedom, or spend the rest of my life in prison. I am afraid if I inform and walk out of here, competitors on the outside will target my family and me. If I do not inform, I will never see my family again. What would you do?